A ladle settled, and the broth glanced the candle. On the linen, a dark vial leaned like a modest confession, and the bowl received its season without a ripple. Ribbons in the window's reflection stirred as if they remembered wind. The door forgot its breath. High in the rafters, a hinge counted once and then chose not to count again. The packed earth under the gallery took a step and folded it into itself, to be spoken later by rain. Before we step inside this story, tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what is the time there right now, because we want to know how fast our story has to reach you. Silence learned its task and held the table still. Carnival color trembled on glass and quieted, as if the room had been warned about joy. The vial cast a small shadow that behaved like ink, a ledger line pretending to be evening. The ladle paused to listen and believed what the bowl told it. Hinge oil kept the door from explaining anything at all. Outside, the gallery boards remembered shoe leather by weight and not by name. Inside, the breath of flame wrote a narrow sentence and then erased it with its own smoke. The ground remembered. The house kept its book first and its colors after. Ink rehearsed ownership in obedient lines. Iron keys spoke against a silk sash with the patience of weather over stone. Invitations lay beside receipts, gilt edging beside figures that did not blink, and in that pairing, mercy took attendance but did not answer to its name. The overseer's arithmetic walked the rows like march time, heel and cane, heel and cane. Stillness became a craft no column could total, worn like linen that would not rustle. Windows counted footfalls and pretended they did not. Oil asked the hinges to be discreet, and they agreed to speak only in breath. At the threshold, the earth was tamped to a kind of memory that did not require words. The mistress turned a page and found a name reduced to an initial, a neatness that satisfied the pen. The ledger admired its own symmetry and folded itself to rest with a seal's small weight to keep it faithful. On such a night, color would be permitted so long as nothing escaped the line. The door kept its poise, and the window wore its own reflection like a second skin. The ground remembered and did not tell. He poured and trimmed wicks and set porcelain beneath silver, moving in the seam where truth survives. The cane's tap set a pulse he did not answer, and the lamp obeyed. Behind his eyes, two small flashes kept time. A sister sold up river on a rain day, the bell on the levee laughing too loud. A father's back blue with arithmetic, each line an entry that no one would read aloud. His breath took their measure and stayed even. A drawer kept a folded cloth that remembered lamp oil. When unfolded, the smell made the room lower its voice. In a cupboard, a labeled tonic waited with its quiet warmth for the tongue, its numbness for the hand. The bottle's mouth was a dark, careful circle. Names lived under the tongue, safe as beans in a pocket, counting themselves to pass the time. The window watched and forgot on command. The spoon touched a rim and did not ring. In the seam of the house, where the ledger's lines thinned, stillness held. The ground listened through the posts and filed what it heard in silt. Mardi Gras neared and plates multiplied. Rumor moved quicker than music. Salt clumped in the dish and made a low hill. Someone said the air had turned. A rooster found the wrong hour and declared it anyway. By the well, a child's rhyme warned the window not to look when lanterns walked, and the rhyme stuck to the bucket's echo and came back smaller. The mistress read receipt cures as if syllables could coax heat into reason. The overseer kept a private cordial, and the bottle wore its label like a permit. In the quarters, symptoms traded themselves for signs and back again. The menu card named abundance in a hand that never washed the platters. The cough rag was folded inward, stain, to make the mark behave. A doorjamb learned to hold light as a palm holds water, brief, trembling, determined. Laudanum's brown glass admired the candle and did not blink. A tonic promised steadiness and delivered a sleep with edges. On the gallery, voices walked softer at dusk, because dusk had begun listening. The Hinges learned a new courtesy and refused to confess what they knew. Rumor learned names that medicine had not earned. A woman in a neighboring parish had swallowed a remedy too deep. A man elsewhere mistook his dose and slept through his own anger. A child was soothed beyond waking. The ledger did not carry these as more than cost or absence. In the kitchen, breath fogged a small square of glass and left it changed. Lanterns rehearsed their path and stayed put. The door did not choose a side. Ribbons waited to be tied to wrists that had learned the weight of obedience. The earth at the threshold kept its quiet. The house prepared to be a stage and then reconsidered and chose to be a room. The ground remembered, because that is work the ground knows how to do. A planter's smile slowed by the width of a breath, and the room adjusted its shoulders to make space for the delay. A lady's hand found the table's edge and stayed, as if Walnut could finish a sentence the mouth had left open. The spoon's shadow lengthened and forgot to return. A napkin learned a new weight and kept it folded in, cool and obedient. Teaspoons measured even mercy, while the ledger drew even lines. Neither book nor bottle priced the body right. Hinge breath replaced hinge speech. The lamp bowed its wick as if to hear better and not be seen judging. In the kitchen, damp air took the blame because it could not argue back, and the whisper chose bad spirits with the same steady care used for flour. A damp napkin made a small vow against a brow and kept the vow until it stiffened. The window practiced fog and clarity. Fog and clarity. Feigning ignorance with the solemnity of duty. A spoon returned to a rim and did not ring. A hand that never trembled miscounted once, then steadied, and the room forgave by looking away. Drops were counted. So were sighs, which can be tallied if a house has learned to listen. A ledger line appeared where none was needed. Another vanished where help might have been, proving ink can behave like weather. A chair creaked and apologized. The lamp lifted a little, the way an ear lifts when it knows enough for now. Beyond the door, laughter tried its legs and stood uncertain, then sat again because sitting looked kinder. Two names moved behind the teeth and kept still. A cuff searched for the table's edge and found patience waiting there. The window let its breath write a brief script and then swallowed it. In the pantry, silence arranged its jars until each label faced front, the only truth it dared. The hinge breathed again and did not tire. At the threshold, the earth learned a heavier print and kept it soft for later. Counting continued without lips, and the house learned to carry it like a psalm no one would sing aloud. A ribbon fell from a mask and did not complain when a quiet hand took it. Linen remembered other duties and agreed to one more, plain as oath. A cork darkened at the lip lay down like a witness who would not be called. A kitchen match slept in a hem, sulfur tucked as a secret thumbprint. Small things assembled with the shyness of parishioners, each taught its use in a low voice without applause. The moon agreed to be absent. Behind shutters, that refusal felt like permission. Outside, music declared itself and bright steps followed. Inside, other steps chose the rug's edge where footfalls are harvested softly. Paces were counted from pantry to table, 10, from door to hall, 6, from sideboard to curtain's shadow, 3, and the patience between. A ring of keys napped like old teeth sure of their bite. The iron latch minded its own weight. Ribbon practiced a loose knot and held. Linen rehearsed a fold, then unlearned it, becoming only a strip, a line ready to lie where lines must. The cork remembered a label's promise and a night's hush. The match carried sulfur like a prayer best spoken when no one is watching. Air took the shape of these little objects and stood nearer, listening. Breath became liturgy. 12 for those whose names were buried under numbers. 3 for those never written. 1 for the seed kept at the back of the throat. Doorjamb light cupped itself like water and trembled, but refused to spill. The hinge drew oil and practiced silence, testing the mystery of its own breath. In rooms warmed by color, the root wrote itself, pantry to bowl, bowl to table, table to mouth, mouth to story. Counting moved beneath steam, a quiet arithmetic whose answer is known before the sum begins. The parade outside beat cover for the hour. Noise performed for those who require it, while stillness served those who do not. Cloth waited on the wrist and betrayed no weight. A fiddler sawed at a tune that did not hear its own edge. Under the gallery, the earth pressed its soft account of steps into a ledger no hand could smudge. It would not answer when asked, but it would remember where the asking stood. Bowls settled like bells turned inward, mouths open only to themselves. Spoons rang once and accepted silence like a law at last obeyed. From a distant parlor, a hymn fragment forgot its words at the doorjamb and stood there humming the shape of comfort. In a drawer the ledger dozed, its seal a small stone upon sleep. Justice, priced by the day, found a pillow beside it. The doorjamb grew its private breeze and kept it. Cloth was tested with a wrist. Ready, said the pulse, without pride. Time married hinge breath. In, the soft labor of wood and oil. Out, the same. Measured breath rose like a fine mist and left no stain. A hand set a bowl by the width of a spoon's handle. The table agreed to hold without remark. Rooms make rings when they wish to keep their counsel. The window declined to watch and offered a reflection instead, a second house that minded itself. The iron latch learned the weight of a look and pretended to be a thing without intentions. The spoon lay on its back and confessed nothing. Below, boards listened with the patience of grain and promised not to judge. If laughter came, it wore soft shoes and did not travel. If a hand paused, another continued. Motion is the second god of houses like this. The ledger breathed once like paper when night lifts, then slept better than most. Cloth over an arm learned water's mind, and then learned to be cloth again. Breaths moved beneath plates, small weather passing beneath a larger sky. The parade's drum came up against the wall and lost its nerve. Here the smaller noises ruled, china edging wood, a cuff grazing linen, the candle's low sermon on patience. The table made covenant with the hour, hold, receive, forget. The ash signed the agreement. The hinge signed with nothing at all. Names did not ride the air, they lived in the chest, keeping time like a choir no one had hired. Outside, brightness kept its shining. Inside, precision worked quietly, like an oath that never expects to be written. The act was litany without trumpet. Ladles moved as if hands were reading. Steam lifted and read the air back, line upon line, an unwritten homily about heat and patience. Each quiet pour married a name never written, spoken inside breath where the ledger cannot eavesdrop. Tally needed no chalk. Windows kept their glass and became walls, Doors chose to be walls too. The room drew one long breath and did not return it. In the grate, fire stayed polite, a red animal content to wait. Cloth on the wrist learned to be weather without calling itself by name. The bowl received and kept faith with receiving. Names walked through the chest, shoulder to shoulder. A procession daylight would not allow. The ladle traced a crescent and set it down like a signature only one person could read. Steam admired itself in the window's patient face and vanished on contact, refusing to trouble the glass with memory. No announcements volunteered. No spoon asked to be bell again. The table performed its holding. Walls listened with the grain. When the tally reached itself, the names turned and stood, present and seen by the heart that summoned them. Ladles rinsed their river back to stillness. Borrowed breath returned in thin portions and practiced being air. Outside, parade sound tilted and forgot this house. Inside, measure ended where it began. A silence that pressed and then agreed to lift, slow and exact. The window remembered window. The door remembered threshold and held the line. Cloth folded into itself the way a river returns to bed when night keeps the bank. Ember practiced patience and kept counsel. Steam that had learned names left no letters, which is how a tally keeps its dignity. Under the table, the ground held the weight it was given and filed it with other nights that had not asked for witnesses. The ground remembered. 4 places dimmed by degrees. Napkins folded into slow birds and settled, as if cloth had learned to become quiet. Footsteps widened and forgot their measure. Laughter tried to stand and chose the chair instead. The teaspoon rested and dreamed itself a bell. The ground beneath the gallery received a stumble and kept it soft, the way earth edits grief without erasing it. Rain considered the eaves and decided against speech. The places learned a hush no toast could loosen. Glass held its light like a tired lantern. A cuff searched the table's edge and found the patience of wood. A shadow grew beneath a plate, neat as a ledger line, and then thinned as if ink had been asked to be kind. The window wore its own reflection and returned nothing. The door preferred to be a wall and kept its vow. Napkin birds slept on wrists. Spoons forgot to answer the rim. The bowl remembered what it had received and did not discuss it. A chair made a small noise that apologized for being heard. On the floorboards, a heel placed itself more carefully and was forgiven. In that mercy, silence learned to count. 1 breath, 2, 1 name, 2. Outside, parade music examined the siding and lost courage. Inside, breath rethreaded itself, a stitch that knows the seam will hold if it is not watched. The teaspoon's bell dream persisted, tender and unrequired. Steam wrote its last faint cursive on the glass and left no letter. The cloth found the lap and became a lap again. The soft patch by the step waited for a weight that knew it well. What moved now moved as if under water. Language, if it came, would be a hand on a shoulder, not a sentence. The ground held the moment where the foot faltered and kept it level, a courtesy older than law. Rain withheld its verdict. The house counted, and when it reached the number it feared, it did not say it aloud. It only taught the light how to stand still. The book wrote property and loss with the same hand and praised itself for evenness. Testimony was sifted until only what paid could travel. Ink admired straightness. Docket lines stood like cane after frost, stiff, pale, sure of their posture. The iron pen made its cold scratch and took it for virtue. Elsewhere, men walked free by arithmetic, and forgetting, took the oath as policy. Names turned to instruments, bodies to entries. silence to compliance, a seal pressed down the margin until the paper felt certain. The erased space did not argue. The page had already decided what absence meant. The door to that room learned no kinder dialect. Its hinge refused grace and called it order. Outside, weather kept its schedule. Inside, a clerk aligned sheets and admired the obedience of paper. A line item counted hours lost, not breath taken. A signature balanced columns and told itself this was justice. Under the steps, earth held the weight of those who waited and filed it beside older weights that had needed the same patience. The threshold was packed firm, as if true testimony preferred soil to oath. When the ink dried, the book declared a witness unnecessary. It had written. Names retreated to the only place untouched by stamps or seals, the mouth that would not release them. The window pretended to be a mirror, because reflection offends no one. The door shut with its iron idea of mercy. The page slept. The ground did not. It kept the docket other hands could not read and made no noise about it. A cork with a dark mouth slept in a drawer. A ribbon remembered oil and kept the scent beneath its color. At the well, children taught a rule. Windows must not watch when lanterns walk. They set it as a game and never asked who taught it first. Heels counted dust into ceremony. The step kept a soft patch even in good weather, as if a word were buried there that refused to harden. A hinge received oil more often than needed and did not complain about generosity. Door frames were rubbed to the patience of old shoulders. Windows practiced the right blink. When the drawer opened, iron and cloth took one breath and returned to their sleep, polite as relics that know they are not to be handled. A thin trace rose, lamp oil, a memory of rain, linen dried too fast, and the room, unbidden, held its breath. The rhyme outlasted faces. Lanterns walked in the telling and did not spill their light. Someone's heel leaned where the ground was kind and found the kindness still there. The hinge kept its newer courtesy and pretended it had always known silence as grammar. In another house, a menu card curled and learned to be blank. In this one, a small stain chose to remain small. The well took the rhyme and returned it smaller, yet it returned it. This is how fragments keep. A last light made a thin ring on a glass rim and held it there. Two shadows folded into the grain of the hall and stayed as if wood could archive breath. This was not revenge. It was a weight returned to a leaning scale and set down without trumpet or audience. Windows chose to close and called it dignity. Hinges accepted oil like a blessing and forgot their ache for a while. The house resumed its angle as if nothing had moved, though the air wore a new seam. In the grate, an ember practiced patience. On the table, a spoon lay like a narrow hand at rest. Somewhere under the threshold, earth kept a place soft for a heel it recognized. The ledger slept with its seal and dreamed its straight-line dream. The ground did not sleep. It remembered as soil remembers, by holding shape, by keeping weight, by knowing where water turns back. Walk with us into future investigations, if these quiet rooms still call. Press like to keep this small flame tended, share so the hush can cross to other tables, subscribe to be told when the next door eases open, and in the comments leave a single word, listening or remembering, so the ledger of witness knows a presence stood here.